Mother, we've waited long enough. Those words shattered Eleanor Whitmore's world. Spoken by twin sons she thought lost forever. She'd buried their existence in a vault of shame, believing her secret safe. But atop Manhattan's grandest hotel, they rose, tall, unyielding, their blue eyes mirroring hers, cutting through her gilded empire. What drove them to this moment? Vengeance, justice, or something deeper? This is a tale of betrayal so raw it'll grip your heart, of truths that burn brighter than the city skyline. Will Eleanor face her past or crumble under its weight? Stick with me to unravel every twist. You won't want to miss a single word. If you're hooked, hit that subscribe button and share where you're listening from, what time it is, and your wildest guess for how this ends. Drop it in the comments. Let's dive into a story that'll leave you breathless, wondering, what secrets would you hide to keep your world intact? Chapter 1. The Shattered Strand, 925 words. The echo of those whispered words, "Mother, we've waited long enough," still haunted Eleanor Whitmore as she stood frozen in the glittering ballroom of the Celestial, Manhattan's crown of opulence. The chandeliers above cast prisms across her emerald gown, but her hand betrayed her, clutching the broken strand of pearls that had spilled across the marble floor moments ago. The lawn can of their fall had silenced the crowd, drawing every eye, none sharper than those of the two men across the room. Elias and Julian Kane, identical twins, their presence a storm wrapped in bespoke tuxedos. Their skin, a deep, rich brown, contrasted with eyes of piercing blue, her eyes unmistakable, accusing. Eleanor's breath caught, a vice tightening around her chest. She knelt, fingers trembling as she gathered the scattered pearls, each one a weight pulling her back to a past she'd buried. Victor Whitmore, her husband, stooped beside her, his voice low, oblivious to the earthquake within her. "Careful, darling. Those cost a fortune." He retrieved the clasp, his hedge fund magnate's charm masking the impatience in his eyes. "The Kane brothers," he murmured, nodding toward the twins now laughing with a tech billionaire. "They just bought this chain for $4 billion. Sharp as knives, those two." Eleanor's pulse roared, drowning out the violin quartet's swell. "My sons!" The thought clawed at her, raw and impossible. She rose, forcing a smile, but her legs felt like glass. "I need air," she said, her voice a brittle thread, and slipped toward a velvet-curtained alcove, the crowd's chatter fading behind her. The city skyline glittered beyond the glass dome, indifferent to the unraveling of her carefully crafted life. At 48, Eleanor was New York's untouchable socialite, Park Avenue penthouse, a daughter at Yale, a husband who bent markets to his will. But those eyes, those damn blue eyes, threatened to shatter it all. Her mind reeled, dragging her back to a time when she was Ellie Harper, 20 and reckless, her heart entwined with Marcus Kane's. A law student by day, jazz pianist by night, Marcus had a smile that warmed her through Manhattan's bitter winters. They'd met in a cramped library, his fingers brushing hers over a shared book, sparking a love that defied her family's whispered sneers. When she found herself pregnant with twins, joy turned to dread. Her parents' dining room became a tribunal. "You'll disgrace us," her mother hissed, shoving adoption papers across the mahogany. "No daughter of mine will raise those children." Eleanor had wept, her pen shaking as she signed, convinced by threats of disinheritance and Marcus's dreams of a legal career that she had no choice. At an upstate clinic, she'd held her boys for a fleeting moment, their tiny hands curling around her fingers, their eyes, those blue eyes, blinking up at her. Then they were gone, whisked away, adopted separately, she was told, their records sealed. She'd lied to Marcus, choking out that they'd miscarried and fled to Europe, severing their love. Victor, a family friend with ambition in his veins, had stepped in, offering stability, a new life. She'd married him, bearing Ellie Harper and her sins. Now in the alcove, the pearls burned in her palm. How did they find me? The twins' laughter across the room felt like a blade, their ease among tycoons a mockery of her sacrifice. Elias, the taller one, gestured with a glass, his movements sharp, commanding. Julian, softer in demeanor, nodded, his gaze flickering toward her. A moment, then gone. They weren't the helpless infants she'd abandoned. They were men, powerful, deliberate. Her stomach twisted. Did they know the truth, or was this cruel chance? Victor's hand grazed her shoulder, pulling her back. You're pale, Eleanor. What's wrong? His tone was concern, but his eyes searched, always calculating. She forced a laugh, brittle as the pearls. Just the champagne. I'm fine. But her gaze darted to the twins, now shaking hands with the hotel's owner. Their confidence a mirror of Marcus's old charm. A memory flashed, Marcus playing a gentle melody, promising her forever. She'd betrayed that promise, and now it stood before her, doubled. A waiter approached, his silver tray bearing a single card. From the Kane brothers, madam, he said, voice deferential. Eleanor's fingers hesitated, then took it. The card was heavy cream stock, embossed with Kane Towers. Scrawled in ink, lounge after the gala. Don't keep us waiting. Her throat closed. This was no coincidence. They knew. Victor glanced at the card, his brow furrowing. What's this about? Nothing, she lied, slipping the card into her clutch, her smile a mask. A charity pitch, probably. But her heart hammered, each beat a countdown. The twins' eyes found her again, not accusing now, but expectant, as if they'd already won. The ballroom's opulence, crystal flutes, silk gowns, faded, leaving only the weight of their gaze. She was a queen in a crumbling court, and they held the scepter. As Victor steered her back to the crowd, his arm proprietary, Eleanor's mind raced. What did they want? Revenge, exposure, or something she couldn't yet fathom. The pearls in her clutch pressed against her, a reminder of the life she'd traded for this one. She'd built an empire on lies, but those blue eyes promised to tear it down. The night was young, and her reckoning was just beginning. Chapter 2. Whispers from the Shadows, 935 words. The card burned in Eleanor Whitmore's clutch as she followed the twins' directive, her heels clicking a desperate cadence down the hushed corridor of the Celestial's upper floors. The Gala's fading violins offered no reprieve, their melody a mocking underscore to the dread pooling in her chest. She'd left Victor at the ballroom's edge, his parting words, "Don't make a scene, Eleanor," laced with a sharpness that felt but couldn't place. Now as she approached the oak doors of the private lounge, her pulse was a traitor, betraying the poise she'd honed for decades. Those blue eyes, Elias and Julian's, waited beyond, promising to peel back the layers of her past. She pushed the door, the wood groaning like a warning, and stepped into a world that felt less hers with every breath. The lounge glowed with restrained menace. Firelight flickered across leather armchairs, casting long fingers over a mahogany table where Elias Kane sat, bourbon untouched. Julian stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, Manhattan's skyline framing him in cold, glittering light, his gaze softer but no less unrelenting. "You came," Elias said, his voice a blade wrapped in velvet, rising to meet her. "Good. Sit, mother." The word mother struck Eleanor like a slap, her knees buckling as she sank into a chair. "You can't be my sons," she whispered, fingers twisting the card's frayed edge. "They told me you were gone, adopted, safe." Julian's smile was a ghost's, faint and cutting. "Safe?" he said, stepping closer, his cufflinks catching the fire's gleam. "Elias fought to eat in Montana's foster homes. I stole library books to survive in Idaho. Safe wasn't our story." He paused, sharing a look with Elias. A flicker of shared pain, a pact forged in absence. Their unity was a dance, Elias's intensity tempered by Julian's calm, and it unnerved her. Victor slipped in, his shadow falling across the table. "What the hell is this, Eleanor?" His tone was outrage, but his hands fidgeted, a crack in his polished veneer. She glanced at him, searching for an ally, but found only calculation in his eyes. Elias ignored him, tossing a folded DNA report onto the table, its pages stark against the wood. "We're not here to debate," he said, voice low. "You carried us, then lied. To us, to Marcus Kane, our father. He died 6 years ago. Heart failure, thinking his sons were lost. Why? Eleanor's throat closed, tears stung her eyes. I had no choice, she said, voice cracking like brittle ice. My parents, they threatened to cut me off, to ruin me. I was 20, terrified. Marcus, she faltered, a memory surging. Marcus's fingers weaving through hers, his jazz saxophone a soft hum under their whispered dreams in a Harlem club. She'd loved him, fiercely, until her family's prejudice caged her. I thought you'd have a better life, she finished, hollow. Julian leaned forward, his eyes softening, but his words were steel. A better life? We clawed our way up, piecing together who we were. Found each other by chance, a tech conference mix-up. DNA doesn't lie, Mother. He adjusted his glasses, a gesture so like Marcus's it stole her breath, a ghost in the firelight. Elias and I spent years dreaming of you, Julian continued, his voice catching. Every birthday we'd wonder, does she think of us? Elias cut in sharp. Enough, Jules. She doesn't get tears. Their exchange, Julian's vulnerability, Elias's edge, revealed a bond tempered by shared loss, a brotherly rhythm that made Eleanor ache for the years she'd stolen. Victor's voice sliced through, too loud, too quick. This is absurd. Eleanor, tell them it's a mistake. But his eyes darted to the DNA report, his fingers twitching as if to snatch it. She frowned, a seed of doubt sprouting. Why was he so rattled? Elias smirked, reading the room like a predator. No mistake, Mr. Whitmore. We know who she is, and what she did. He leaned back, bourbon glass glinting. We're hosting a summit to rebrand the Celestial as Kane Towers. You'll join us, Mother, as our guest of honor. The world will know. Eleanor's heart lurched. You're blackmailing me? Julian shook his head, his calm unnerving. Not blackmail, a choice. Your husband's fund is bleeding, investors are jittery. One whisper of scandal and it's over. We can steady it, or let it fall. Victor's face paled, his mask slipping. You planned this? The hotel buyout? The summit? All to trap us? His outrage felt staged, his eyes too quick to avoid hers. A memory flickered. Victor, years ago, rifling through her letters, claiming it was for her safety. Had he known more than he'd let on? Elias rose, his shadow looming. We've waited long enough for truth. You have until dawn to decide. He slid a cream-colored card across the table, identical to the first, now with a single line. Midnight, Suite 7001. No excuses. Julian paused at the door, his gaze lingering on Eleanor. We didn't want it to be like this, he said softly, then followed Elias out, their steps synchronized, a silent vow. Victor rounded on Eleanor, his voice a hiss. Fix this, or Lila pays the price. But his hand lingered too long on the DNA report, his knuckles white. Eleanor's stomach twisted. Was his anger real, or a performance? She clutched the card, its weight a ticking bomb. The lounge's fire crackled, but it offered no warmth. Dawn was hours away, and the truth was closer than she'd ever feared. Chapter 3. The Brothers' Gambit, 940 words. The fire's embers in the lounge had barely cooled when Eleanor Whitmore slipped away from Victor's shadow, her clutch pressed tight against her racing heart. His hissed warning, fix this or Lila pays, echoed, but it was the card's scrawled ultimatum, midnight, Suite 7001, that propelled her through the Celestial's gilded halls. The Gala's distant hum faded, replaced by the pulse of her own dread as she rode the private elevator, its mirrored walls reflecting a woman unraveling. Dawn was a deadline she couldn't outrun, and the twins' blue eyes, Elias's steel, Julian's sorrow, demanded answers she wasn't ready to give. Yet as the doors parted to the penthouse floor, she steeled herself. Whatever game Elias and Julian Kane were playing, she'd face it, if only to protect the fragile world she'd built for Lila. Suite 7001 loomed, its double doors a silent challenge. Eleanor knocked, the sound swallowed by the corridor's plush silence. The door swung open, revealing Elias, his silhouette sharp against the suite's opulent glow. Right on time, he said, his voice a low drawl, gesturing her inside. Julian sat at a sleek glass table, a tablet's blue light casting shadows across his face, his glasses glinting like a shield. The room was a fortress of wealth, marble floors, a bar stocked with crystal decanters, and a panoramic view of Manhattan's sleepless skyline. But it felt like a courtroom, and she was on trial. "Sit," Elias commanded, pointing to a chair opposite Julian. She obeyed, her gown whispering against the leather, the card now a crumpled relic in her hand. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt, though her fingers betrayed her, twisting the fabric of her skirt. Julian tapped the tablet, its screen flashing a contract. "You'll co-chair our summit, rebranding the Celestial as Kane Towers," he said, his tone measured but unyielding. "You'll stand as our mother, publicly. No more lies." Eleanor's breath hitched. "You're forcing me to expose my past? My daughter, Lila, she'll be humiliated." Elias leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Humiliated? Try growing up with nothing, wondering why your mother threw you away." His voice cracked, a rare fracture in his armor, and Julian's hand grazed his shoulder, a silent anchor. Their bond was palpable, a rhythm honed through years of absence and reunion, and it cut Eleanor deeper than words. "We didn't just plan this tonight," Julian said, his voice softer but no less resolute. "We've been building this for years, late-night calls, digging through sealed records, piecing together who we are." He paused, sharing a glance with Elias, a memory passing between them. "We found each other at a tech conference, a fluke. I was pitching a startup. Elias was keynoting. Someone called me by his name, and when we met," he trailed off, a smile flickering. "It was like seeing my own soul." Eleanor's chest tightened, a memory of Marcus's laugh flashing, warm, unguarded, now lost forever. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I thought you'd have families, futures." Elias's laugh was bitter, slicing the air. "Futures? I fought off bullies in Montana foster homes, stealing scraps to eat. Julian read under streetlights, dodging cops. We built Kane Towers from ash, but we never stopped wondering about you." He stood, pacing, his shadow dancing on the marble. "Every birthday we'd ask, 'Does she care?' Now we know." Julian slid the tablet closer, the contract's terms stark. "Your husband's fund is over-leveraged," he said, his voice clinical. "One leak about your past, and his investors bolt. We can stabilize it, our network, our capital, or we can let it burn." Eleanor's mind reeled. "You're threatening my family?" "No," Elias said, stopping mid-step, his eyes locking onto hers. "We're giving you a chance to be more than a lie. You owe us that." A memory surged. Her parents' cold dining room, her pen signing away her sons. Victor's voice in the aftermath. "You're free now, Ellie." Free? She'd been caged ever since. Now Victor's absence in this moment gnawed at her. Why hadn't he followed? His earlier agitation, the way he'd lingered over the DNA report, felt like pieces of a puzzle she couldn't yet solve. Julian's voice pulled her back. "We spent years angry," he admitted, his glasses catching the light. "Elias wanted to ruin you. I wanted answers. We settled on this." He gestured to the tablet, then to Elias, their unity a quiet force. "We're not kids anymore. We're men who get what we want." Elias crossed his arms, a smirk playing on his lips. "And we want the world to see us, not as your shame, but as your sons." Eleanor's hands shook. "Lila's future, her career, she can't weather this." "Then tell her yourself," Elias said, his voice cold. "You have 4 weeks, or we do it for you." He slid another card across the table, this one with a date. "Summit, 4 weeks. Be there." Julian stood, his expression softening. "We didn't want it to hurt like this," he said, then joined Elias at the door. "But truth doesn't wait." They left, their steps a synchronized echo, leaving Eleanor alone with the tablet's glow and a question that burned. What had Victor known all along? She rose, the contract's weight heavier than the pearls she'd lost. The skyline beyond the window mocked her, its lights a constellation of secrets. Victor's face flashed, his quick anger, his searching eyes. Had he been her savior or her jailer? She tucked the card into her clutch, her resolve hardening. Midnight had passed, but the real deadline loomed, and she'd need every ounce of courage to face it. Chapter 4. A Shattered Facade, 930 words. The weight of the summit card pressed against Eleanor Whitmore's palm as she stood in the shadowed expanse of her Park Avenue penthouse. The city's restless hum, a faint pulse beyond the windows. The twins' ultimatum, 4 weeks to confess her past or lose everything, had followed her from the suite's sterile glow, a ticking bomb she couldn't defuse. Victor's footsteps broke the silence, his polished loafers clicking on the parquet as he entered the study, a tumbler of scotch in hand. "You've been dodging me," he said, his voice a calculated blend of concern and reproach. But his eyes betrayed him, flickering, evasive, like a man guarding a fault line. Eleanor's fingers tightened on the card, her resolve a fragile bulwark against the storm she knew was coming. Lila, her daughter, deserved the truth, but at what cost? "You let those twins ambush us," Victor continued, setting the glass down with a deliberate clink, his gaze pinning her. "What did you promise them up there?" His tone was sharp, but the way he leaned too close, as if searching her face for cracks, stirred the doubt she'd carried since the lounge. She thought of his hand lingering on the DNA report, his quick dismissal of her fears. "I promised nothing," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "But they know, Victor. They're my sons." The words tasted like ash, heavy with years of denial. She moved to the window, the city's lights blurring through unshed tears. "I need to tell Lila. Before they do." Victor's laugh was a jagged edge. "Tell Lila? And ruin her clerkship? Her future? You'll destroy this family, Eleanor." His outrage felt rehearsed, his hands clenching as if to mask something deeper. She turned, studying him, the man she'd married to escape her past. Had he been her anchor or her architect? The study's oak door creaked and Lila appeared, her Yale sweatshirt a stark contrast to the room's opulence. At 22, her hazel eyes, Victor's eyes, held a quiet strength, but now they widened with unease. "Mom, Dad, what's going on?" Her voice was soft, but the air thickened, the truth a blade poised to fall. Eleanor's heart stuttered. "Lila, sit," she said, gesturing to the leather sofa, her hands trembling as she sank beside her daughter. Victor hovered, his silence a pressure she couldn't ignore. "There's something I've kept from you," Eleanor began, her voice breaking. "Before your father, I loved a man named Marcus Kane. We had twin sons." Lila's breath caught, her fingers digging into the sofa. "Sons? You have other children?" Her voice rose, disbelief threading through shock. "Where are they?" Eleanor's eyes burned, a memory flashing. 2 tiny faces, blue eyes blinking up at her in the clinic's harsh light. "I gave them up," she said, the words a wound. "My parents, they said it was the only way. I was young, scared. I thought they'd have better lives." Lila's face crumpled, tears spilling. "Better lives? Because they weren't, what? White enough for your family?" The accusation landed like a blow, and Eleanor flinched, her hand reaching for Lila's, but her daughter pulled away. "You erased my brothers. How could you?" "I didn't know how to fight them," Eleanor whispered, her voice raw. "My mother, she threatened to disown me. Marcus. He had dreams, a career. I thought I was saving him too." She saw Marcus's saxophone case, his gentle smile, the love she'd buried. "I lied to him, said they died. I've carried that every day." Lila stood, pacing, her hands raking through her hair. "And now? Those men at the gala? Elias and Julian? They're my brothers? You let me meet them without a word?" Her voice broke, a sob escaping. "I trusted you, Mom. I thought we were honest." Victor stepped forward, his voice smooth, too smooth. "Lila, your mother made mistakes. We can fix this. Keep it quiet." But his hand grazed the desk, brushing a photo of Lila as a child, and Eleanor caught it, a flicker of guilt, not concern. She remembered him years ago, checking her mail, claiming it was for her protection. What had he hidden? "Fix it," Lila snapped, turning on him. "You knew, Dad? Or are you just fine with lies, too?" Her eyes blazed, searching his face, but Victor's silence was damning. She shook her head, backing toward the door. "I can't be here. I don't know who you are, either of you. The door slammed, the sound a gunshot in Eleanor's heart. Eleanor rose, her gaze locking on Victor. You pushed me to hide this, she said, her voice low, accusing. Why are you so afraid of them? Victor's jaw tightened, his hand reaching for the scotch, then stopping. I'm protecting our life, he said, but his eyes wouldn't meet hers. Call those twins. End this before it ruins us. He left. The doors click, a cold finality. Alone, Eleanor sank to the sofa, Lila's words echoing. You erased my brothers. She pulled out her phone, fingers hovering over Elias's number. The card's date, Summit, 4 weeks, loomed like a guillotine. She dialed, her breath shallow, and Julian's voice answered, calm but firm. Mrs. Whitmore, ready to talk? I need time, she said, her voice a plea. Lila, she's devastated. Please. Julian paused and she heard Elias in the background, his tone sharp. She's had years. Julian's reply was softer. 4 weeks, Eleanor. Tell Lila yourself or the world will. The call ended, a dial tone cutting through her. Eleanor clutched the phone, the study's shadows closing in. Victor's evasions, Lila's tears, the twins' relentless truth. They were a tide pulling her under. A faint memory stirred. Victor at the clinic, his hand on her shoulder, urging her to sign. Had he orchestrated more than she knew? The skyline beyond offered no answers, but one truth was clear. Her lies were crumbling, and the cost was only beginning to show. Chapter 5. The Montana Ledger, 945 words. The echo of Lila's slammed door still reverberated in Eleanor Whitmore's mind as she stood in the penthouse study, the city's skyline a cold witness to her unraveling world. Julian's voice on the phone, 4 weeks, or the world will know, had left a scar, a deadline that pressed against her like a blade. Victor's shadow had retreated, his parting demand to end this ringing hollow. His evasions now a puzzle she couldn't ignore. The crumpled Summit card lay on the desk, but it was the faint memory of Victor at the clinic, his hand too steady on her trembling shoulder, that drove her to act. She needed answers, not just for Lila, but to face the son she'd lost, or thought she'd lost. By the time the sun rose, Eleanor was on a private jet to Montana, chasing a truth that felt as distant as the twins' blue eyes. The Kane Towers summit loomed, its opulence a stark contrast to the dusty archive room Eleanor now entered in Missoula, Montana, 3 days later. The air was thick with the scent of old paper, shelves sagging under faded ledgers from the orphanage that had once held her sons, or so she'd believed. Elias and Julian had sent her here, a cryptic email arriving at dawn. Start with the 28-year records. Look for the truth. Their trust, however conditional, was a lifeline she clung to, though their absence now, replaced by a stern archivist named Clara, felt like a test. Clara slid a leather-bound ledger across the table, its pages brittle as Eleanor's nerves. These are from the year you specified, she said, her glasses glinting under the fluorescent hum. Adoptions were messy back then. Records got lost. Eleanor's fingers hesitated, then opened the book, her breath shallow as she scanned names, dates, lives reduced to ink. Halfway through, a scrawled entry stopped her cold. Twin males born to E. Harper, transferred to care, deceased within hours. Her vision blurred, tears spilling onto the page. Deceased, she whispered, the word a wound. Her sons, her babies, dead? The clinic's chaos flashed, nurses rushing, her own screams, Victor's voice urging her to sign. Had it all been a lie? She turned to Clara, voice breaking. How? Why? Clara's face softened, but her words were blunt. Heart defects, likely genetic. Common in twins, hard to catch back then. But, she hesitated, pulling another file. There's a discrepancy. 2 other boys, born same day, listed as stillborn to an A. Monroe. They were sent here, alive. Eleanor's heart lurched. Aisha Monroe. The name felt like a key, unlocking a door she'd never seen. Clara nodded, handing her a photocopied form with Victor's signature. A payment to the clinic, dated the day of her delivery. Found this tucked in the back, Clara said. Odd for a family friend. The room spun, the ledger's weight crushing. Victor hadn't just been there, he'd orchestrated it. Had he swapped her sons with Aisha's, hiding her boys' deaths to bind her to him? She clutched the form, her knuckles white, as a memory surfaced. Victor's face at her wedding, triumphant, not loving. Her phone buzzed, Elias's number flashing. She answered, her voice a ghost. "You knew?" "We suspected," Elias said, his tone sharp but not unkind. "Julian dug up the payment record last year. We needed you to see it." In the background, Julian's voice cut in, softer. "We're not your sons, Eleanor, but we're tied to you. Aisha's our mother." Eleanor's tears fell freely now. "My boys, they're gone?" Julian's pause was heavy. "Yours, yes, but we need you to find Aisha. She deserves the truth, like we did." Elias added, "And Victor, he's not done playing you. Watch the summit." Their words were a pact, their brotherly rhythm, Elias's fire, Julian's calm, a steady pulse through the line, grounding her. "I'll find her," Eleanor vowed, her voice steadier. "For you." Clara cleared her throat, offering a final document, a Brooklyn address for Aisha Monroe, scribbled by a caseworker. Eleanor took it, the paper trembling in her hand. "Thank you," she said, leaving the archive, the ledger's truth afire in her veins. Back in Manhattan, the summit's opening night was hours away, its stage lights already warming for a spectacle she couldn't avoid. She stood in her hotel suite, the Brooklyn address burning a hole in her purse. Victor had texted, his tone clipped. "Be at the summit. Don't make this worse." But his words felt like chains, not concern. She thought of Lila, her daughter's tear-streaked face, and wondered if she'd ever forgive her. Eleanor opened her laptop, searching Aisha's name. A photo loaded, a woman with kind eyes, blue as the twins, at a Brooklyn nursing home, her smile weary but warm. Eleanor's heart ached. Aisha had lost as much as she had, maybe more. She closed the laptop, resolve hardening. She'd face the summit, but not as Victor's pawn. A knock at the door startled her. A courier handed her an envelope from Kane Towers unmarked. Inside was a USB drive, labeled in Julian's neat script. "Listen before the gala." Her fingers hovered over it, dread curling in her gut. Was this the twins' final move, or Victor's undoing? She plugged it into her laptop, the screen flickering to life, and a voice, Victor's, cold and unmistakable, filled the room. Eleanor's breath caught, the truth closer than ever, but sharper, more dangerous. The summit spotlight waited, and with it, a reckoning that would change everything. Chapter 6. The Puppeteer Unmasked, 940 words. The laptop's glow cast harsh shadows across Eleanor Whitmore's hotel suite. Victor's voice from the USB drive slicing through the silence like a confession carved in ice. "Send them far. Montana, anywhere," he'd said, his tone clipped, commanding, to an unseen accomplice at the clinic decades ago. "She'll never know." Each word tightened the noose around Eleanor's heart, confirming the ledger's truth. Victor hadn't just been complicit, he'd orchestrated the theft of her sons, swapping them with Aisha Monroe's to sever her from Marcus Kane. The summit's gala loomed hours away, its spotlight a stage for her to face him, but the weight of his betrayal threatened to crush her resolve. Lila's tear-streaked face, Elias and Julian's distant voices, and Aisha's unknown pain swirled in her mind. She snapped the laptop shut, her hands trembling, and slipped the USB into her clutch. Victor's lies ended tonight. She arrived at the penthouse, the city's pulse a faint hum beyond the windows, and found Victor in the study, his Scotch glass sweating on the desk. His tailored suit couldn't mask the strain in his posture, his eyes darting as she entered. "You're late," he said, voice smooth but edged, rising to meet her. "The gala starts soon. We need to present a united front." Eleanor's gaze hardened, the USB a hidden blade in her hand. "A united front?" she said, her voice low, venomous. "Like the one you built when you paid to steal my sons?" She held up the photocopied payment form from Montana, its ink accusing. "You lied to me, Victor. You took my boys and gave me Aisha's." His face paled, but he recovered, stepping closer, his outrage a practiced mask. "That's absurd, Eleanor. You were hysterical back then, signing papers without a thought. Blame your parents, not me. His hand reached for the form, but she pulled it back, her eyes searching his, flickering, guilty, a man caught but unrepentant. Don't, she said, voice shaking with fury. I heard you. She pulled the USB from her clutch, holding it like a grenade. Your voice, Victor, telling the clinic to send them away. You wanted Marcus gone, so you buried my sons and built our life on their graves. Victor's mask cracked, his hand freezing midair. You don't understand, he said, his voice dropping, almost pleading. I loved you. Marcus was a dreamer, a nobody. He'd have dragged you into ruin. I gave you this. He gestured to the penthouse, the skyline, a kingdom of glass. I tried to find them later, but the clinic burned. The records were gone. Eleanor's tears burned, but she held her ground. You didn't find them because you didn't care. You wanted me broken, dependent, but my sons are dead because of you. The study door creaked, and Lila stepped in, her Yale sweatshirt rumpled, her eyes red from crying. Mom, she said, then froze, seeing the USB, the form. What's happening? Her voice trembled, a child caught in a storm. Eleanor's heart twisted, but she couldn't shield her daughter now. Your father, she said, voice steady despite the ache. He paid to take my twins. They died, Lila, and he hid it. Lila's gaze snapped to Victor, her breath hitching. Dad, is it true? She stepped closer, her hands clenching. You lied to Mom? To me? Our whole life? Those vacations? Those bedtime stories? Was it all fake? Her voice broke, tears spilling as she searched his face for the father she'd trusted. Say something. Victor's shoulders slumped, his eyes darting between them. I did it for us, he said, voice hollow. For our family. I wanted to protect you, Lila. But the words rang false, his hand brushing the desk as if to steady himself, a memory flashing for Eleanor. Victor at their wedding, his smile triumphant, not tender. Protect? Lila choked, backing away. You broke Mom's heart. You stole my brother's. I don't know you. She turned to Eleanor, her voice a whisper. I need time, Mom. I can't. She fled, the doors slam a fresh wound. Eleanor faced Victor, her fury a quiet fire. You've lost her, she said, and me. She pocketed the USB, its weight a vow. I'm going to the summit, not for you, for Elias, Julian, and Aisha. Victor grabbed her wrist, his grip tight, desperate. You'll ruin me, he hissed. The investors, they'll pull out. Think of what you're doing. She wrenched free, her eyes blazing. I'm done thinking for you. She turned to leave, but paused, glancing back. You should have burned that tape, Victor. Now it's your turn to face the truth. Outside, the summit's lights beckoned, their glare a promise of exposure. Eleanor's phone buzzed. Julian's number. She answered, his voice calm but urgent. Eleanor, we're at Aisha's. She's ready to meet us before the gala. Suite 402. Elias's voice in the background firm. Bring the tape. Their unity, their shared purpose, steadied her, a brotherly bond she'd never given but now relied on. I'm coming, she said, clutching the Brooklyn address from her purse. Aisha's face from the photo, kind, blue-eyed, flashed in her mind, a woman whose loss mirrored her own. As she stepped into the elevator, the penthouse receded, Victor's empire a fading illusion. The USB drive pulsed in her clutch, a weapon she wasn't sure she'd use. Aisha waited, a stranger bound to her by fate, and Lila's absence ached like a bruise. The gala's stage was set, but the truth she carried was heavier, its edges sharp enough to cut them all. Chapter 7. Threads of Reunion, 950 words. The elevator's descent from the penthouse felt like a plunge into the unknown, Eleanor Whitmore's fingers tightening around the USB drive that held Victor's damning voice. His confession, send them far, still seared her, a betrayal that had cost her 2 sons and shattered Lila's trust. The summit gala's lights loomed closer, but Julian's call had rerouted her heart to a Brooklyn address, to Aisha Monroe, a woman whose loss mirrored her own. Elias's firm directive, bring the tape, and Julian's quiet urgency pulsed in her mind. their brotherly harmony a beacon through the storm. As the car sped across the Brooklyn Bridge, Manhattan's skyline receded, its glitter no match for the weight of the truth she carried. Aisha's kind, blue-eyed face from the photo haunted her, a stranger bound by a shared theft. Eleanor's breath hitched, her resolve a fragile thread. She'd face this woman not for absolution, but for the sons who'd tied their fates together. The brownstone stoop was cracked, its warmth spilling through a half-open door where Julian waited, his silhouette soft against the glow of a single lamp. "You're here," he said, his voice a gentle tether, stepping aside to let her in. Elias stood deeper within, arms crossed, his intensity softened by the sight of a woman at the kitchen table. Aisha Monroe, her hands cradling a worn journal, her eyes the same piercing blue as her son's. The room smelled of fresh bread, a humble contrast to the celestial's sterile grandeur. And Eleanor felt like an intruder, her emerald gown out of place amid faded wallpaper and family photos. Aisha rose, her gaze locking onto Eleanor, a mix of wariness and recognition. "You're her," she said, voice steady but laced with pain. "The one they took my boys for." Her words weren't an accusation, but they cut deep, and Eleanor's knees weakened, her clutch slipping to the floor. "I didn't know," Eleanor whispered, tears brimming. "They told me my sons were adopted, safe. I only learned they died, and that yours were given to me." Julian moved to Aisha's side, his hand on her shoulder, a protective gesture that mirrored Elias's watchful stance. "She's telling the truth, Mama," Julian said, his voice soft but firm. Elias nodded, his eyes flicking to Eleanor, a grudging respect in their depths. Their unity, Julian's empathy, Elias's resolve, was a living thing, forged in years of searching, and it made Eleanor ache for the brothers she'd never known. Aisha opened the journal, its pages yellowed, filled with sketches of two boys with blue eyes. "I wrote to them every night," she said, her voice breaking as she read aloud. "My boys, I dream you're out there. Strong, loved. I was a nurse at that clinic. They said my twins were stillborn, but I heard cries. I always knew." Her tears fell, and Julian knelt beside her, his own eyes glistening, while Elias gripped the table, knuckles pale. Eleanor's voice trembled. "Victor, he paid to swap them. My sons, they died of heart defects. I think it's genetic. I'm so sorry, Aisha." She stepped forward, tentative, her hand hovering as if to bridge their shared loss. Aisha met her gaze, then took her hand, her grip warm, forgiving. "We were both robbed," Aisha said, "but my boys found me. Yours, I'll pray for them." The words broke something in Eleanor, a sob escaping as she sank into a chair. Julian handed Aisha a tissue, his smile faint but real. "We found each other 5 years ago," he told Eleanor, his voice a bridge between them. "Elias and I, we wrote letters after that conference, trading stories of foster homes, dreams of a mother. When we saw your eyes in the mirror," he glanced at Elias, who nodded, a rare softness in his jaw. "We knew we had to find her." Elias spoke, his voice rough. "We planned every step, buying the hotel, luring you to the summit. But this," he gestured to Aisha, to the journal. "This is why we fought." Their brotherly bond, woven through shared letters and late-night vows, was a fire that warmed the room. And Eleanor felt its heat, a mother's pride she had no right to claim. "I'll help you," Eleanor said, her voice firm despite the tears. "Anything you need, money, a home, a voice. I owe you that." She pulled the USB from her clutch, its weight a reminder of Victor's treachery. "And I'll make him pay." Aisha shook her head, her smile weary but kind. "Keep your money. Just be there tonight, at the gala. My boys deserve to be seen." She closed the journal, her fingers tracing the sketches, a mother's love etched in ink. Julian checked his watch, his expression shifting. "We need to get back," he said, glancing at Elias. "The gala starts soon. Mama, you ready?" Aisha nodded, rising, her strength a quiet force. Elias looked at Eleanor, his voice low. "Bring the tape. Let the world hear it." Eleanor nodded, her resolve steeling. "I will." She followed them out, the brownstone's warmth lingering as the car carried them back to Manhattan. The USB burned in her hand, Victor's voice a ghost she'd unleash. Lila's absence ached, but Aisha's forgiveness, the twins' unity, gave her courage. As the summit's lights grew closer, Eleanor's phone buzzed. A text from Lila. "I'm at the gala. We need to talk." Her heart leapt, hope warring with fear. The stage waited, and with it, a moment to rewrite her story. But Victor's shadow loomed, his empire teetering on the edge of her truth. Would she play the tape, or spare Lila the final blow? The answer lay in the gala's glare, a reckoning she couldn't escape. Chapter 8. Shadows of the Lost, 945 words. The glow of the Brooklyn Bridge faded behind Eleanor Whitmore as the car sped toward the Celestial, the summit gala's lights a beacon of reckoning. Aisha's journal, its inked dreams of her stolen sons, lingered in Eleanor's mind, a mirror to her own loss. The USB drive in her clutch held Victor's voice, a weapon she hadn't yet decided to wield, while Lila's text, "I'm at the gala. We need to talk," pulsed with fragile hope. Elias and Julian sat across from her, their silence a shared resolve, their blue eyes reflecting Aisha's strength. Julian's hand brushed Elias's sleeve, a quiet reassurance, their brotherly bond a steady current in the storm. Eleanor's fingers traced the Brooklyn address, now a talisman, but her heart turned to her own sons. Daniel and Michael, names she'd learned in Montana's dusty ledger. One gone forever, the other a distant star in Paris. The gala's stage waited, but first she needed to know who they'd become. Back at the Celestial, Eleanor slipped into a private office, the gala's muffled roar seeping through the walls. A laptop flickered on the desk, its screen a portal to the truth she'd chased since Montana. Elias had sent her a contact, a retired social worker in Missoula with access to sealed adoption files. She dialed, her breath shallow, and a gravelly voice answered, "Marjorie Lane, you're the Whitmore woman?" "Yes," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. "I need to know about my sons, Daniel and Michael from the Montana orphanage." Marjorie's sigh crackled through the line. "Tough case. I pulled what I could." She emailed a file, and Eleanor opened it, her eyes scanning the sparse lines. Daniel, adopted by a rancher's family, had died at 15, his heart failing during a summer storm. Likely the same genetic defect she'd only discovered in herself weeks ago, after a routine checkup revealed her own ticking risk. The words blurred, tears falling. "I killed him," she whispered, the guilt a stone in her throat. "Not your fault," Marjorie said, her tone softening. "No one caught it back then. But Michael, he's another story." Eleanor's heart leapt as Marjorie continued. Adopted by a teacher, moved to Paris at 18. He's an architect now, designs bridges. Married a painter, has a daughter, 5 years old. A photo attached to the file loaded. Michael, his blue eyes hers, laughing with a dark-haired woman and a girl clutching a sketchbook. Eleanor's sob caught, relief warring with longing. "He's alive," she said, her voice breaking. She opened a blank email, her fingers hovering over the keys. What could she say to a son who didn't know her? She began typing, each word a prayer. "Michael, I'm your mother. I never stopped loving you. Marcus, your father, played jazz, dreamed big. I'm sorry I failed you." She attached a faded photo, her and Marcus young, laughing at a Harlem club, and sent it to the address Marjorie provided, her heart a kite cut loose. Julian's voice broke the silence, gentle from the doorway. "You found them?" He stepped in, Elias behind him, their presence a quiet anchor. Eleanor nodded, wiping her tears. "One's gone. The other, he's in Paris. I wrote to him." Elias leaned against the wall, his eyes softening. "Good. You're doing what we couldn't, facing it." Julian smiled, nudging his brother. "Told you she'd come through." Their easy banter, a dance of trust forged through years of letters and shared dreams, warmed the room, and Eleanor felt a pang of pride for the men they'd become, even if not hers. "We've got your back at the gala," Julian said, adjusting his glasses, a gesture so like Marcus it hurt. "Aisha's ready to speak. You?" Eleanor clutched the USB, Victor's voice a ghost in her hand. "I don't know if I can play it," she admitted. Lila, she's already broken. Exposing Victor might destroy her. Elias's gaze was steady. She's stronger than you think. Like us. He paused, sharing a look with Julian, a memory passing between them. Nights in foster homes, trading stories of a mother they'd never met. Truth hurts, but lies kill. A knock interrupted, and a staffer poked her head in. Mrs. Whitmore, the gala's starting. They need you. Eleanor rose, her gown rustling, the USB a burning weight. She followed Elias and Julian to the ballroom's edge, where Aisha waited, her simple dress radiant with quiet strength. Lila stood nearby, her eyes red but resolute, and Eleanor's heart lifted. Her daughter approached, voice soft. I'm here, Mom. Whatever you do, I'm with you. Eleanor squeezed Lila's hand, tears brimming. Thank you, she whispered, the USB's edges biting her palm. The gala's lights flared, the crowd's murmur rising as Elias and Julian took the stage, their presence commanding. Aisha followed, her journal in hand, ready to tell her story. Eleanor glanced at Victor, seated in the front row, his smile a brittle mask, unaware of the storm she held. Her phone buzzed, a notification from Paris, an email from Michael. Her breath caught, but she didn't open it, not yet. The stage called, and with it, a choice. Play the tape and end Victor, or shield Lila and risk her son's trust. The twins' eyes found hers, Elias's fierce, Julian's hopeful, their bond a challenge to be brave. As the spotlight warmed, Eleanor stepped forward, the USB a heartbeat in her hand, the truth a fire she could no longer contain. Chapter 9. Skyline Reckoning, 950 words. The spotlight's glare burned Eleanor Whitmore's skin as she stepped onto the gala stage, the USB drive a searing weight in her trembling hand. The Celestial's ballroom pulsed with anticipation, its crystal chandeliers casting fractured light across a sea of silk gowns and tailored suits. Elias and Julian Kane stood to her left, their blue eyes a steady anchor, their brotherly bond a quiet vow etched in their shared stance. Aisha Monroe, journal clasped to her chest, radiated resolve beside them, her presence a testament to a mother's enduring love. Lila's touch lingered on Eleanor's arm, her whispered, I'm with you, a fragile bridge rebuilt. Below, Victor sat in the front row, his smile a polished lie, oblivious to the truth Eleanor held, a truth that could shatter his empire or break her daughter's heart. The email from Michael, unopened in her pocket, was a distant pulse, a hope she couldn't yet claim. The stage was hers and the choice was now. Elias raised a hand, silencing the crowd's murmur. Tonight, he said, his voice commanding, we launch Kane Tower's future, a foundation for foster youth, 60 million strong. Applause erupted, but his gaze found Eleanor, a challenge unspoken. Julian stepped forward, his glasses catching the light, and introduced Aisha. Our mother, he said, voice thick with pride, lost us to lies but never stopped believing. Aisha opened her journal, her voice steady despite trembling hands. I wrote to my boys every night, she said, reading a passage. I see you in the stars, my loves, strong and free. The crowd leaned in, some wiping tears, as she recounted her years as a nurse, the clinic's betrayal, and the sons she'd reclaimed. Elias and Julian are my heart, she finished, her eyes meeting theirs, a mother's love a beacon. Julian squeezed her shoulder, Elias's nod a rare vulnerability, their bond a living thread that made Eleanor's throat tighten. She'd never given that, but she felt its echo in Lila's gaze. The microphone passed to Eleanor, its weight heavier than the USB. She stepped to the podium, her gown shimmering, but her voice that emerged was raw, unguarded. I've lived a lie, she began, her words slicing the silence. I gave birth to twins, believing they'd find better lives. I was wrong. My husband... She paused, glancing at Victor, his smile gone, eyes wide with dread. He paid to take them, to hide them from me. One son, Daniel, died because of a heart defect I carried. The other, Michael, lives in Paris, a world away. Gas rippled through the crowd, cameras flashing like lightning. Lila's hand found hers, a silent strength, and Eleanor drew breath, quoting Marcus Kane's poem etched in her memory. Love burns where truth lies, unshadowed. I let prejudice and fear define me, she continued, tears falling. But tonight, I stand for Aisha, for Elias and Julian, for every child stolen by silence. I'm sorry. The crowd stood, applause thundering, but Victor's face was stone, his hands gripping the chair as whispers spread among investors. Eleanor lifted the USB drive, its black casing glinting. This holds the truth, she said, voice steady now. Victor's voice, confessing his theft. I could play it, end him. She looked at Lila, whose eyes pleaded, then at Victor, a man undone. But I won't. Not for him. For my daughter, who suffered enough. She set the drive down, a choice that felt like shedding chains. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others stunned, as Elias stepped forward, his voice low. That's more than we asked, he said, a grudging respect in his gaze. Julian smiled, nudging him. Told you she'd surprise us, he said, their banter a spark of the brotherly fire that had carried them through this night. Aisha approached, her embrace warm, whispering, You gave my boys their moment. That's enough. Eleanor clung to her, their shared pain a quiet absolution. Lila joined, her voice soft. I'm not ready to forgive Dad, she said, but I'm here, Mom. We'll find Michael together. The gala swirled on, music rising, but Eleanor slipped to the balcony, the skyline a canvas of stars against the city's endless pulse. Elias and Julian joined her, their silhouettes framed by light. We're taking Mama to Paris, Julian said, his voice light. She's never seen the ocean. You should come. Elias chuckled, elbowing him. You're still the dreamer, Jules. I wrote better letters, though. Their laughter was a melody of survival, a bond Eleanor admired, even if it wasn't hers to claim. You did good, Elias added, meeting her eyes. For what it's worth. Eleanor smiled, tears brimming. It's worth everything. She pulled out her phone, the email from Michael glowing. I got your letter. I need time, but I want to know you. Her heart soared, a fragile hope taking root. Victor's empire was crumbling, investors pulling out, whispers of scandal. But Eleanor felt unshackled, the skyline a promise of something new. Lila appeared, linking arms with her. We'll be okay, she said, and Eleanor believed her. As the gala's lights dimmed, Eleanor stood between two worlds, the one she'd lost and the one she'd found. Aisha's journal, the twins' laughter, Lila's touch, and Michael's distant words wove a new tapestry, not perfect, but honest. The USB drive lay on the podium, untouched, a ghost she'd left behind. The city stretched before her, its lights a constellation of second chances. Michael's reply was a star she'd follow, and Lila's trust a path she'd walk. Elias and Julian's voices carried from the stage, planning their future, their mother at their side. Eleanor exhaled, free at last, her heart whispering a truth she'd never bury again. Love, like truth, endures. Outro, 100 words. Truth can shatter or save, and Eleanor's journey proves it. From buried lies to a skyline of hope, her story leaves us questioning. What secrets would you face to rebuild? Did the twins' gambit or Victor's betrayal grip you most? Stay with us for more tales that burn bright. Thank you for listening. Your support fuels these stories. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share where you're tuning in from, what time it is, and your thoughts in the comments. Let's keep the conversation alive. Until next time, chase your own truth and let it set you free.